Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of Coffee with Sales Engineers. I am so excited this morning to have a pleasure of drinking coffee with Danny Smith. I like your coffee, my man.
Theme for the
I've got
day.
I've got the trusted advisor one, but I like yours better. Thank you for coming to the show, Danny. Would love to have you introduce yourself to the audience, and then I've got some really juicy questions for you today.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me. My name's Danny Smith. I am part of a group at Stripe called Partner Solution Engineering. I'm a solution architect by trade.
Looking at your LinkedIn, you've got technical chops. We talk a lot on the show about how important is it to have academic engineering background, computer science degree. You've got a master's in computer science. Tell us a little bit about that journey. You obviously are going through college and you're deep into code and
Yeah.
computer science. How did you transition into what we call sales engineering?
Yeah, it was a journey for sure. I have a bit of a different collegiate background. I'm not from an Ivy League school. I'm actually from the New Orleans, Louisiana area, Mississippi Gulf Coast, that whole area, which is a very interesting place to grow up, very interesting place to go to college. I had a lot of interesting jobs in college that taught me different things about what motivates people, how to deal with people. Because as you said, being in the tech world, we're dealing with code a lot of times, trying
Yeah.
to move things around. We're trying to solve problems from a coding perspective. But what I find in sales engineering or solution architecture is you're really a hybrid.
Those-
Things like tending bar on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, being a musician. I dabbled a little bit in piano and songwriting, but mainly the interesting thing about New Orleans is you always have to wear multiple hats. I learned a lot about competition. When you're playing in a band or you're attending bar in Bourbon Street, if someone gets bored or someone's not satisfied, they'll just walk to the bar next door. And our GMs were very focused on that. There has to be live music all the time. You can't take breaks. If you want to take a break, bring a friend in that knows how to play piano. They can play a few songs while you go take a break. So I grew up in that kind of hustle and bustle culture.
it's not just about competition that you're going to lose a customer to somebody else, but you had this sixth sense of observing if your audience is engaged or not, which is so
100%.
critical
Right.
as a sales engineer, especially
As
in
a
remote,
sales
right?
engineer, if
Yeah.
people are, I always urge people to have everyone turn on their cameras or go out in person if you can. Reading energy is a huge part of your job.
Yeah.
I always tell everybody, everyone should spend a little bit of time in the services industry. It doesn't have to be tending bar on Bourbon Street, but working in a restaurant, working somewhere where you have to deal with everyday hustle and bustle, but also making sure a customer is satisfied. You deal with things like human psychology,
Mhm.
motivation, multitasking. There was a job where I had to play piano and bar at the same time. When one person would go play the song, the other one was making the drinks. And then when that person would stop playing the song, they come over. And so we were literally rotating
Nice.
in a live motion. It was very hectic, but it taught me a lot about multitasking and making sure the audience is engaged. I realized I had an inclination towards computers. My dad was very technical. He was in the Air Force growing up. My mom was a nurse. We were a middle class family that worked hard, but at the end of the day, I learned a lot about what you need to do to move forward. It's usually around hard work, but also what are you talented in? What are you inclined in? What are you interested in? I found myself gravitating towards different things in computer gaming, different things in innovation, what's going on in the world. And I quickly realized that tech is involved in every industry. If it's medical, watching my mom do things as a nurse, there was tech involved. Watching my dad do things for the Air Force, there was tech involved. Everything at the end of the day, there's going to be some tech involved. And so being involved in making that a better experience for
Mhm.
the end user, I started to realize, wow, if I really cut my chops here, the sky's the limit. And so I had to back away from the bartending and musician. I wanted bigger aspirations. I wanted to move into different areas. So I settled on the computer science thing, doubled down on it, and really spent a lot of time in the coding aspect.
Mhm.
And when you do that, 7, 8, 9 hours a day, going to the lab at night. A lot of us, your audience has probably been there. You start to realize, I don't know if I want to do this for a living. I love writing code. I ended up staying in college 2 more years to go for my master's. I wrote a robotics language and spent over a year training this robotic arm to do different things. I wrote the language from scratch.
Wow.
The reason I went back for my master's is some of the jobs I was being offered after my bachelor's were more in coding. I
Hmm.
interviewed at IBM and some places like that. And I didn't know, since I'd done so much of it in college, if that's what I wanted to do for a living. After my master's, some of the jobs presented to me were more in system administration. I was like, wow, that seems like it would be different every day
Yeah.
because there's a problem with something going on every day and you're solving problems instead of
Right.
writing code. I had this epiphany that yes, I got a master's in comp sci, but I don't know if I want to write code. I don't want that to be what I'm measured on at the end of the day to make a living.
Through that journey, when you were sysadmin, did you know anybody in your network that was in the pre-sales or customer-facing role?
That's a great question. It took me many years to understand what pre-sales was. But
Yeah.
so I started as a sysadmin. I dabbled briefly in Texas Instruments as a summer intern and
Okay.
worked briefly there. I really cut my teeth as a system admin in the airline industry at American Airlines. And in particular, out of college, like right after 9/11. And that was an interesting time to be working for an airline. You learn that airlines are one of the few industries that don't take breaks. It's 24/7, 365. There's no such thing as a holiday. Holidays are our busiest time.
Right.
It's just like being in commerce, right? Which is what I'm in now. Black
Yeah.
Friday, Cyber Monday, this is when we move the most money.
That's right.
Airlines, those times of the years when you move the most people.
Right.
And I was on call during holidays. I went from the front lines of tending bar on Bourbon Street to the front lines of sysadmin airlines. That's probably the hardest job I've ever had. You learn a lot about keeping systems up and running, high availability, what that
Right.
really means.
Right.
People would talk to me at American Airlines like, "Hey, if this system goes down, we're all going to be on CNN tonight." That kind of pressure,
There's lives at risk, right?
lives at risk, that we'll shut down the airport if this
Right.
system goes down. I'm like, okay. So I really had to sit down and learn what high availability, and this was before public cloud. Yeah,
Right.
but you're teaching yourself automation and scalability and
Mhm.
reliability, but as a sysadmin. So a lot of the people that were coming in to sell me, I was a vendor. People that were selling me on these solutions were my first exposure to people from Oracle or EMC selling disk arrays. They were trying to sell us on easier, what's going
Right.
to prevent outages, what's going to
Right.
prevent us from being on the news causing some airport shutdown or delays. When those stakes are that high, you're going to listen to anyone who says, "Hey, this software is better than what you're using, or
Right.
this hardware is better than what you're using. Let me show you." But the salespeople were always pitching, and they would always have a technical person alongside them. It's always
Right.
interested in that. Like, what is that? I understand the sales guy. He's
Yeah.
taking me out. He's talking to me about pricing and things.
Yeah.
And the technical guy was always there to interact with me in a different manner.
There was a level of trust that you had because you could relate to that individual, right? That was the technical person with the sales rep. Was there a moment when
Yes.
something one of these SEs did that were like, okay, this person knows their stuff, and I know my stuff, but how come they're not doing sysadmin job? How come they're here working with
I
their
can
sales rep?
remember the exact moment. I won't mention this person. He's still on my LinkedIn. He is a long-term friend. It was very transformational. Spending that much time with these guys, they were like, wow, you really understand how to articulate business requirements, but now you're running around the corner helping us write the code and test the code. And they're like, why aren't you in pre-sales? And I'm like, what's pre-sales?
They were asking you why you're not in
They
pre-sales,
were asking me, they're like, we would hire you in a minute because you're doing this on a scale bigger than what we've seen. And I didn't know it was a job.
right?
Honestly, I was so, busy on keeping this airline up and running. We had massive customers. I thought my job was so important as far as getting into the nuts and bolts on delivering, making my customers happy,
Yeah.
that I didn't realize based on my background that I had this skill set that would translate between working with people versus working with engineers. I knew I had that. Everyone always told me that, but I didn't know there was a specialized job that fit into that
Right.
for these people that have this hybrid skill set. And that was very illuminating. It was one guy in particular who sat me down one night after one of these really long sessions. He's like, you should, of anyone, you would be really good at pre-sales. And I blew him off at the time. It doesn't sound like a real job. Like my job's important. And it clicked in my head. I started telling people, what is this I started looking into it a little bit more. But that was the moment where the light bulb went off. I should at least start to consider what this would be, what this would look like as a career.
Because you were doing meaningful work, but maybe there was some part of that
Yeah,
performance as a piano player, that people interaction as bartending was missing. And here's somebody
correct.
saying that
Yeah.
they don't have to be exclusive, right? You can combine the two if you could. So at that point, you just looked into it. How did you end up landing your first
Interesting
sales role?
story. This is where I always have to kick myself, which is why I love doing this podcast because I wish I would have looked into it. I wish I would have gone out and hunted for this. I spent too much time in delivery, but that's where you cut your chops and that's where you get the street cred. I'll tell a few stories about that. End of the day, my career goes back a ways, right? So we're talking 2008, 2009, when we hit the recession. HP decided we're going to reduce all of our pay at least 10%. They had somewhat of a layoff, but they just said corporate wide, everyone's taking a cut. And my team in particular, working 100-hour weeks, making that successful. And then someone turns around and says, we're going to reduce your pay. It was just very eye-opening. It forces your hand a bit. And I started thinking, I never intended to work for the biggest tech company in the world. They reduced our pay because they didn't sell enough copiers and printers during the recession. So that's when you realize you're working for a company that's too big. I'm doing this, and because of this,
Something else,
I'm
right?
being affected across
Right,
the board.
right.
And so I over rotated or did a solid rotation and said, I'm going to leave HP and go to a startup
Mm,
because I want to have more control. A couple of my friends from HP had gone to this startup already. And so
yeah.
they started pitching me on, if you come here, you can be a cloud architect. And I'm like, what's a cloud architect?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, you could take your automation software that you've got expertise in, and we will allow you to train. When you work for a really big company, you're usually very specialized.
That's right.
They wouldn't even let me install some of these other pieces of software. They're like, no, you want to be the server automation person. You'll be that person globally, but it's
Right,
one software stack. So you'll
right.
become an expert here. And when you go to a smaller company, like, we need you to be an expert on
You got to wear
all of
multiple
it.
hats.
You to go build the cloud. I'm like, wow, I
Right.
get to actually do all the software. I was very intrigued by that. And I had never resigned a job before. I had gone through these acquisitions, but it was
Mm-hmm.
my first time to just walk away and say, you know what, I'm going to take a chance,
Do
go
something
to this
different.
startup with some of my friends and be a cloud architect. And that's what launched me into pre-sales because immediately they were like, here's what the job's going to be. You're going to have to help us sell these solutions to a customer, and then you're going to have to go implement it. Because
Right.
when you work for a 5, 6 person company,
Everybody selling.
you have to wear all these hats.
Yeah.
We ended up topping out at about 25 before we got acquired, but at the time it was very small, and I
Yeah.
was pretty much the principal architect. And
Yeah.
so I had to go from specializing in one piece of software to being in front of C-level executives
Yeah.
at different companies. This introduced me to the partner ecosystem
Yeah.
because this company, our inroad to opportunities was that we were ex-HP and we had
Mm-hmm.
specialized software knowledge. And so this company, it was called Seamless Technologies. We were small and we were part of the HP partner ecosystem. And so customers who wanted to have more specialized knowledge, the HP professional services at the time didn't have a lot of specialized knowledge in the cloud space.
Mm-hmm.
They were more like specialized in like the hardware, so more
Yeah.
traditional. And so we became the avant-garde boutique partner, that new
Right.
cloud, and
Right.
we had specialized knowledge. And so we were able to leverage that, and HP ProServe would sometimes send us opportunities, or other companies would send us opportunities and say, we want to use your most specialized partner in the cloud space. And there
Right.
was us and a couple others that were in
Right.
that.
What's also interesting, Danny, you said, which I don't think a lot of SEs may have the empathy for selling a solution that they then have to implement. I talked to a lot of SE teams where pre-sales and post-sales has this conflict of interest and this concern around, oh, as an SE, you're out there selling the dream. And as a solution architect, post-sales, you have to rebuild the dream because the dream that you
Right.
sold is not reality.
We've all been there.
And for a lot of people, it's not that they are doing it maliciously. People act different. Buyers act different in sales cycles than they act as customers. There's a more righteous element to, I'm now paying for this technology and I expect it to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas when I'm evaluating technology, I'm also looking at multiple technologies, and you may not even ask all the questions or dig deep enough to fully understand. But when you become a customer, you start digging deeper. It is interesting that your journey actually started right from ground zero. The moment you became pre-sales, you knew that whatever you were selling in this cloud architecture to a prospect, you needed to turn around and deliver it. So it was ingrained in you. If you oversell it, you're going to have to pay for it.
Well, not only was it ingrained in me then, it was ingrained in me earlier in my career when I would get pulled into situations implementing a particular thing. I would be like, who sold this? We don't even come close to doing that. And then so we got to go write all these special middleware solutions. I was always a little bit angry. You're like, I don't know who sold this. Obviously, they were a good seller, but there was some gray area there that we had to fill in. So to your point, 100% accurate that when you go into a small scenario where you're like, I know I'm going to be the one that has to implement this, I cannot oversell. I under promise, over deliver. That's that I really harp on. I know that's become pretty common.
One thing we haven't talked a lot on this podcast is the role sales engineering plays in partner ecosystem. Tell us about, you mentioned even in your company was part of a partner ecosystem. You guys were boutique specialized, so you were getting exposed to sales engineering. A lot of people don't know that sales engineering is not just pre-sales. There's sales engineering in post-sales. There's sales engineering in channel and partners. So give us more insights into how did you fall into that?
I was in that same boat when I was at HP. I didn't know what a partner was. I was dealing with vendors typically, and I was dealing with customers. So when somebody had said partner, and this company was pitching, the startup was pitching the idea of where we were going, like we're going to be a partner to HP. And I'm like, well, what does that exactly mean? And it's, a lot of times these companies, the HPs of the world, the Stripes of the world, ServiceNow, I've worked there, is to scale, to get out and build all these relationships with all these users. They want to leverage either smaller companies or sometimes these companies are big, what we call the GSIs of the world, Accenture, Deloitte, Capgemini, PwC. These companies have long-standing relationships with users and they become trusted advisors. They want to go to these partners and get their advice on being agnostic in solving a solution. That was one of the reasons I got excited about moving on from HP. When I was at HP, I could only sell HP. Right. So when I looked at a solution, oh, we have this and this, and but this, we're not as strong in here. I wish I could use like VMware solutions for this, but I couldn't. That was the reason EDS got into the acquisition mode of EDS, of HP with EDS. EDS was agnostic. HP acquired them because we were actually beating them in a lot of deals. We could sell different stacks of hardware, software. We were more flexible. When I went to the small companies, we're also in VMware's partner ecosystem. We're starting to talk to Amazon and Google. And so I could look at a problem and find a solution by building best of the best.
Right.
And that's what partner
one tech stack.
Whereas when you're a user and you're talking to a vendor, they're going to sell you what's on their truck. Whereas when you're talking to a partner, is going to look at it more holistically and try to solve with best of the best. So that's one aspect of being a partner, the trusted advisor status that you get with the user. I really honed in on that. I've got more flexibility to solve problems and I would build relationships with users just being in the small company as a partner that I couldn't build when I was aligned with a particular vendor. That was a huge aspect of it. I always like to educate people on that.
Core to an SC personality is this technical curiosity. And it sounds like the way you were describing, your technical curiosity was limited to HP products. Whereas when you go into partner SC type role, things you can learn just expands because
Yeah.
now you're learning best of breed solutions across the spectrum. The biggest aha I had when I moved into the channel side from having most of my career in sales engineering, I moved into a marathon from a sprint. In
Yeah.
sales, it was like run as fast as you can, close the quarter, and then starts all over again from ground zero.
Yeah.
Whereas on the channel side, it was you may not get results in the short term, but you're still investing and committing a lot for the long haul.
This partner I worked for, the HP partner, we were acquired by a distributor and it's called Avnet, a company out of Phoenix, Arizona area. And they were trying to build like a cloud services business by acquiring a lot of small companies. So that was very interesting. I got put in with I think they acquired 18 small companies, ours being one of
Okay.
them. So it was almost like a Game of Thrones scenario where they just throw us all in the room. Okay, you guys figure it out.
That's right. Some
Um,
of you are going to survive, others
some of you
won't.
are going to survive. My company, thankfully, was one of the three. So we came out of that. And then Tech Data, which was another distributor, came along and acquired. I've been through a lot of these acquisitions in my career. I've only changed jobs like 3 times in a 20-year career, but it's these 7 or 9 different acquisitions. And Tech Data had relationships with Amazon. They were Amazon's AWS's biggest distributor in the world. I didn't know that this even existed where you can distribute public cloud solutions. There's these advanced resale models where they can buy like a lot of these reserved instances, sell them to smaller companies who can in turn sell them to users on the street. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they've built a very advanced reselling model. They understand they don't want to manage the relationships with these millions of customers. The small mom and pop restaurant can't exactly pick up the phone and call AWS,
That's right.
but they can call a local partner who has built expertise on AWS. Sometimes that's even better. Someone from AWS, they have no knowledge of your business. Call a partner, they've got intimate knowledge of your business because they built your cloud.
Right.
And they've got intimate knowledge of AWS because they're certified. In any partner ecosystem, if you're going to build it, it's built around technical expertise. You have to actually prove to this vendor that you know what you say. It can't just be like, hey, I'm going to be a Stripe partner. No, we
Right.
have certifications you have
Yeah.
to pass. That's the really cool scenario of being in the partner ecosystem is you can take care of smaller users, understanding their business, build that technical expertise across build. When I was at Tech Data, I had to be certified. We were a huge Microsoft partner. So now I can stand in front of a user and say, hey, Azure may be a better solution for you
Right.
than AWS. And maybe GCP might be more secure for this type of load. So you become like this really agnostic advisor that understands the different, and you've got experience building private clouds and hybrid clouds. Now you've got public cloud experience.
Yeah.
I had morphed into this cloud architect based on acquisitions and different happenstances in life and decisions that I made. I've got experience not only as a cloud architect, but also experience in being a partner because I was a small HP partner for a while. ServiceNow was an interesting change for me where some of my really smart friends I knew from my past cloud days at VMware and HP, some of them were going to ServiceNow, which is a SaaS-based platform out of Silicon Valley. I honestly went to do something different. At the end of the day, we were a distributor, and I felt I'd hit the end of what I could learn and contribute. I wasn't really building clouds anymore. I was flying all over the world, teaching people how to build cloud businesses. That helped me with my business, but I was ready to start doing something technical. And I think a lot of the people in your audience will be like, sometimes if you rotate too far away from that core hybrid, there's a disturbance in the force. I learned a lot at ServiceNow, working for a SaaS company. They really put me in this role. I ran DevOps from a pre-sales perspective, and then also AI briefly before AI really took over the world. This was like 2019. It was just right on the cusp. So I was on the front lines of trying to solve some of these issues from a DevOps, AI ops perspective. But what ServiceNow really taught me and what I want to pass on to the audience is value selling. When you're walking into a room, typically you're asking people for millions of dollars to solve a problem through automation or software or for services. At the end of the day, sales is asking people for money.
Yeah.
What ServiceNow was really good at is building ROI models, really
Mhm.
talking about the value. Yes, this is going to cost you up front, but these are the problems we're going to solve. A lot of the sales motion was dedicated to building these models and selling the value of something. But
Yeah.
what it really also taught me was that discovery. Like it was very interesting. In my previous roles, I would always what we almost call show up and throw up. They say show up and demo, show up and wow the audience. ServiceNow was like, do a little bit of that, but ask them a ton of questions.
Right.
Your time is valuable too. I'm meeting with a Fortune 500 company typically at ServiceNow. They're like, your time is valuable. They're getting to talk to a ServiceNow principal architect.
Mhm.
You're going to pass on information that's going to help them. They need to pass on information that's going to help you. Don't
Mhm.
leave a meeting without learning something intimate about their business, a
Yeah.
critical pain point. Do not leave the meeting without that.
Right.
And we had value
Can create
prompters we'd have to
value,
fill out.
right? You can't create value if you don't understand them. So
Right.
this
And
how
I see this
you,
I see this
yeah,
today where pre-sales people show up, they do their demo,
right.
and when they had the crowds clapping and they leave and they're like, this was a successful meeting.
I think this
And
is, I'm glad you're raising this because there's a huge emphasis lately on value engineering.
try to
Yeah.
spend, and this is one thing I wanted to pass on to the audience. I try to spend as much time on formulating my questions that I'm going to ask in a meeting as I do on my PowerPoint and my demo. I think a lot of pre-sales is in polishing the presentation, making sure you're coming across very slick, the demo is successful, wowing the audience, to your point. But you need to spend as much time if possible. I always try and go to the website of the company. Now that I'm at Stripe, I'll go into their checkout and try to complete a purchase. As soon as I start hitting pain points, I write it down. And that way I can come to the meeting and I'm like, I understand where your pain is because
Right.
I tried to be a customer today and it was hard. When you come with that level of knowledge, now sometimes it can make users a little bit uncomfortable. And this is what I learned at ServiceNow. It's okay because your time is valuable. Make them give you something. Do not leave a meeting without some knowledge of pain on their end. Spend as much time in discovery, and that will bubble up through leadership. That will also help whoever's implementing this end solution. The more discovery you do, the more you document, the more you put into what we call here at Stripe our solution plans,
Mhm.
the better. Make that a living document. That's a huge thing I definitely wanted to convey.
That's a really great call out, Danny. Thank you for sharing that. I know we're coming to the end of the conversation. What an amazing journey. I can't believe the hour went by because you had so many inflection points in your career.
Up at Stripe, and I'll finish it there. So when a lot of my smart friends, when you see smart people going to a company, that's
Yeah.
when you should probably pay attention. A lot of smart people I saw at Stripe,
Yeah.
and they came to me and they said, "We're going to build a partner ecosystem at Stripe. This job is perfectly suited for you because you've been a partner, you've been
Right.
a cloud architect, so you've got the technical chops, you've been in pre-sales, and you've been a partner." From day one of helping to build this Stripe partner ecosystem, I've put on that hat of when I was in this small 5-person company. One of the challenges in the partner ecosystem is having access to everything you need to be successful. That can be a challenge when you're a partner because you don't work for HP. The partners don't work for Stripe. Some of them are
Right.
contractors, but they don't have all the access to everything they need to be successful. If you're going to be a sales engineer and help scale the business, share information with your partners, see them as an extension, SE community. That way they're out spreading the good word, helping you close a bigger book of business than you could internally
Yeah.
because you've just scaled your business. You can only really scale. There's a reason that the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles, all of them, the HPs, they all have massive partner ecosystems. There's a
Scale.
reason for that.
That's the only way to scale. And many SEs may not even know that there's partner SEs within their partner communities.
SE is in my role as Stripe. So I'm in, again, this hybrid. I'm in between,
Yeah.
I'm in the SA org, but I'm also in the partner
Right.
ecosystem because I'm helping to build this bridge between what the SEs know
Right.
and what the partners have access to. I co-sell with these partners, teaching them to fish
Yeah.
and be successful on their own. Then I start working with the next partner. So there's a lot of enablement that goes with it. I'm almost like a trainer and a solution architect. So I really love the role, love the company. It's absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm very passionate about these
I can
subjects.
tell. Yes.
And I love this podcast where you don't have to spend 10 years in delivery like I did. These jobs exist. If you are one
Explore.
of these
Right.
hybrids and you have this skill set, go and start looking for the job. I wish I would have started earlier in my career. It gave me the street cred I needed to get into the roles, but that would be my advice if I could time travel and go back to myself. Listen to that guy who said, "Why aren't you in pre-sale?" I probably spent 4 years after that talking myself into it. And I missed some big opportunities because of that. So
I
listen
hope
to
people
your
can look you up on LinkedIn, reach out to you, of course, reach out
anytime.
within your network, talk to other SEs if you're curious about the role. Danny, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It was great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.